My work has always been influenced by some big events going on in my life, and as a young person getting into art, those things happen to be death and loss of some really close people. I've always had just an eye for the odd or the peculiar. So whether that was like an urban or a rural environment, I was always kind of looking at the landscape for information. Growing up in Cleveland was a big influence early on, especially like looking at all of the decay and the detritus around town and seeing just these odd things that seem like they shouldn't be, like buildings falling down. Like both of those things in combination sort of informing each other and then informing me. Light has been this way for me to really make a space my own, and at the beginning of my making these large-scale installations, I was bringing in vintage light bulbs and vintage light fixtures that I was making myself, but like pulling vintage parts and turning off the lights in the gallery, so that sort of subverted the space and made it feel like it was all together and you were in altogether a different environment. And that kind of, I think, helped my viewers catch on to that idea of being in this like quieted, contemplative environment. And kind of light started influencing me and started turning into objects. I started looking at light. I was looking at how light has a presence and an absence. So even though you can see it and it illuminates something, like you can't touch it and it's not really, it's there but it's not tangible to us. And again, relating those ideas to absence and death and loss. I was using light to kind of shine lights on spaces where there was nothing, and then fill the empty dark space with objects to kind of point out like nothing is in this space, and then eventually they kind of got turned into objects. Oh. And I was making these light bulbs and hanging them and then breaking some others, and then where you might expect to see a broken light bulb, I was changing the material to, like, I was using charcoal to kind of, again, like talk about that alchemy thing that might happen, that you might see like in church when the priest goes behind the altar. The moment, again, between life and death, when something just changes. My sister had cerebral palsy, and she grew up in a home with other people with disabilities. One of the women she lived with, her name was Maura, and she also had cerebral palsy, but she also had a form of autism. One of her occupational therapy exercises, her mother would get her these big magazines from a fabric store or jewelry, the Rio Grande books, right? They're so thick. Yeah. And Maura would sit them on her lap and kind of flip through these books, and eventually after a few months they would look really tattered and worn out, and her mother would throw them away. But I saw these books as like a document of this action that Maura was performing, and that was like this spark of a thing for me. At first I was trying to kind of exactly reproduce these magazines as to how they looked, but then I realized I have to set up my own conditions in which to make this work, kind of like Maura did, or kind of unintentionally did herself. So that's when I started thinning out the porcelain and just stacking it and letting the material stack on top of itself and not trying to influence or control the way that it was stacked, just letting that material stack up. I'm starting my new line of prototypes now for the holiday season. These pieces all come out of molds, and I design the prototypes for those molds. Like, liquid clay is poured into the molds, and then you let it sit for a certain period of time, and then you pour the extra clay out, and the plaster mold hyper-absorbs the water out of that liquid clay and turns it into like a regular clay material. I start with some ideas of shapes I want to make, but then once I get them cut, I end up kind of cutting into them and changing them. So actually I think the process of making the prototypes for these pieces does not differentiate that far from the ideation that goes into sculptural work too. I think both influence each other. So I started making pottery kind of as a means to try to have something going on when I got here. And I mean, I never ever would have thought it would be taking off like it is, but there's a great market for it here, and all sorts of. I'm really more interested in like going kind of a designer path than like a individual, unique handmade object path with these objects. So I'm looking to pair with bigger companies. Like I have I have a partnership that I will be announcing in September. I feel like when you're growing up in art, like, or for me anyways, I would say, okay, now I'm a potter, like that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, and then I abandoned pottery. I don't care anything about function. I'm gonna make sculpture, and then it was like, I'm never gonna make an object again. It's all site-specific work. And now as I like come back around to making functional work, I'm finding myself like almost a little insecure with my own place in the bigger picture, right? But designers never seem to pigeonhole themselves like that. Designers allow themselves to design and conceptualize and ideate on whatever they want and then make whatever they want. And so I'm starting to identify myself more in that way because I feel like it allows me to make whatever I feel like. Like I don't want to stop making large scale installations. I don't want to not make objects, but I also want to keep making this. So I see myself as like creating experiences for people, whether it's like the experience of interacting with a small handmade object or whether it's walking into a large scale installation and being hit by that. So it's kind of all about just making an experience for someone. And that, I feel like that realizing that has really opened me up and kind of given me like freedom and permission from myself to push all of this forward kind of all at once.